Okay, welcome to today's talk. This is going to be a talk about the role of perception. It's going to be about the role of perception in shaping our understanding and our experience of reality. It's also going to be talking about a phenomena in Buddhism. The Pali word is called Āsavas. And these are the intoxicating influences that also shape our understanding and experience of reality. We're also going to be looking at how the role of perception in shaping our understanding links with these intoxicating influences, and how we apply the Four Foundations of Mindfulness meditation that we've been looking at in this series to help us diffuse the problems that arise from these Asavas, from these influences, which cause and co-condition suffering. I also want to show the link between the five Khandhas and the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, between the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, which we have on our map, and how they parallel with another way of looking at a division of experience, which is called the Five Khandhas. Today we're going to be exploring the nature of the mind and the path to liberation. Understanding perception is essential in this, in unraveling the workings of the mind, and also addressing the defilements that arise from it. And we'll be looking at the meaning of this word, defilement, in this talk too. The role of perception in shaping our understanding of reality and our experience of reality. How distorted perception can arise, and it can lead to proliferation, that's breeding and increasing and making many, multiples, leading to the proliferation of these Āsavas, or the defilements. The defilements can start off small, but they can breed and breed and breed and breed. They increase and increase and increase. When I talk about Asavas or defilements, I'm talking about things such as cravings, and not just the regular crave, chocolate in the fridge, but other cravings as well, like wanting to be and wanting not to be. Wanting, I want to be famous, I want to be powerful, I want to be in control. And I don't want to be, I wish I wasn't existing, and I wish that didn't exist, I hate it. Those kind of things. Perception, influenced by ignorance and attachment, gives rise to craving. Okay? Perception, the way that we see things and interpret things, when it's influenced by ignorance, not knowing or wrong knowing or distorted views, and also attachment, this gives rise to craving. Craving for things to exist and for self to exist, or craving for things and self not to exist. Here's some quotes from the Buddha. First one of four. Just as a skilled archer can swiftly hit a target, the wise person can skillfully discern the true nature of perceptions, not clinging to what is seen, heard, or sensed. Secondly, just as a bubble appears and vanishes on the surface of water, so too, with the arising of perception, various mental formations arise and pass away. Mental formations means, the moods that go with a perception. Hey, that's a snake over there. And then realizing, and then the fear arises with that, and then go, oh no, it's just a garden hose. And then all of that just arose and passed away. That's also from the Samyutta. The third one, just as a mirage appears in the desert, so too all perceptions are like illusions, constantly changing and devoid of substantial essence. Samyutta Nikaya 22.95. So just, for example, like when you were a teenager, you saw some pop stars and you thought they were superheroes, And then later on you find they're not superheroes at all. That's a way that perceptions change with us. As our values change, as our age changes, as our responsibilities and our role in society changes. So all perceptions eventually change. 4, just as a painter can create various forms and images on a canvas, so too perception shapes the world of experience, giving rise to various mind states and reactions. Anguttara Nikaya 4. So there's our perception faculty inside us, and it's making, shaping, making and pulling apart, and then telling us what things are like all the time, just like an artist inside, making, reshaping, forming and presenting. So let's begin by delving into the topic of perception, how perception shapes our experience of the world and influences our thoughts, emotions, and actions, the impermanent and conditioned nature of perception, and its role in the arising of defilements. So let's just take a look at our map here. We have this block which is just being introduced, perception. So now we're going to take a look at perception. So the Pali word is sanya, which comes from the root sanya, perception. So this involves many things. When you're taking a look at an item or a person or listening, so we use the memory and use the memory to identify. You look at something and you basically ask, have I seen something like this before? And then I can go, it's like that thing I saw before. So you recognize it and you compare it. So memory is always involved in comparing and identifying. Even with artificial intelligence, exactly the same process happens there. But it's also identifying things in terms of human ways. Is it a threat? Is it safe? Is it a friend? Is it an enemy? Is it valuable? Is it healthy? Is it desirable? Do we wish to have that? Do we need it? Or do we just want it, for example? So that involves investigating it and going through quite a lot of processes. It's not just a single process, it's a string of processes where we investigate and we summarize what something is, or we begin to. And also, if you think about it, reading is involved in this because we have to recognize the letters, we have to perceive the letters and the words, and then we also have to perceive the meanings of the sentences and the paragraphs and the pages in the book. So reading involves using perception, and therefore so does a lot of general knowledge, because this also involves a kind of training. Like when somebody told that over there is a hammer, it's a claw hammer. So after that, they have this memory part that can identify it and perceive it. And then they will also be told, well, that claw hammer is used for pulling out nails. So it's that goes in with it. So that's the same way with all general knowledge, is so you can identify a planet in the sky, but then all the other knowledge that you've added to it comes in together with that perception. There's there's the moon, which is X, miles wide, and this surface of it, and added. So that all goes in with the perception as well. Then the learning skills, like I say, like training things, there's a lot of perception involved in driving a car. So then there's this anicca, change, when we perceive change, whether it's in our physical body, we notice that something's changed on our face, or then we've noticed that people around us are growing, they're changing physically, getting silver hair or growing up and maturing. And then there's also just change in the environment, like the seasons, and then other changes in the world. And then assessing is part of perception. Judging, similarly, is a part of perception, where you're weighing up, is something right or wrong, good or bad, is it valuable or is it not valuable? Summarizing. Interpreting. But also critically here, and we're going to focus on this, misinterpreting. So often distorted perceptions are the things that lead to suffering. So let's have a look at also the dictionary definition of the sanya that's given here. It also includes to recognize, to discern, to imagine and think of, or to remind of, or be reminded of. I think that's one of the ways a little bit of confusion can arise, but I just want to refer to it there. Number 5, meaning in that list on the dictionary, says also the meaning of a signal, such as giving a signal, such as when you tell horses to move forward. You say, giddy up, get going. Then that is also sanya. It's like giving a signal, or even also signs and guiding marks, such as like how architects give to builders, and builders use and mark on walls. Also travelers when they're going from place to place. So there's signals and signs are used in that sense as well, which is a different meaning altogether than just straightforward perception. There are also perceptions that, when cultivated, assist with spiritual life. Perceptions of, for example, non-self, like when you cut your fingernails and then you look at the fingernails, bits and pieces, and you say, is that me over there? Because if I am my fingernails, then how come it's just laying over there? So in the same way, my bones will someday be laying kind of over there, or my hair on my head, or my teeth will also be laying kind of over there. So this way you can encourage the perception of non-self. And then of the unbeautiful, you can actually deliberately focus on it, or the drawbacks to habits, when you really reflect carefully about some habits that you got that you consider to be bad habits. Abandoning habits is also a perception that can happen. You can look at the advantages of that. There are ways that you can encourage dispassion rather than fueling passions. There's also ways of dismantling our experience, like we did before with the dependent origination, is to sort of take it into different sections in order to look at how it's arising and causing trouble. There's also the perception of the reality of death. You can really look, hey, one day I really, really, really am going to die, and we don't know when that will be. And then there's opposing food cravings. There's lots of different ways you can look at the negative side in order to cool down passions. So these are examples of perceptions, and those were in our group of 40 meditations, samatha meditations. And we can go back and look at those another day. The famous meditation teacher, who's passed on already, Ajahn Chah, said, distorted perception is like putting on someone else's glasses and wondering why everything looks blurry. Meditation is like getting a new pair of glasses that perfectly fit your eyes, and suddenly the world becomes crystal clear. Notice that crystal clear part there. So what do you want, blurry world or crystal clear world? Joseph Goldstein, insight meditation teacher, said this: in mindfulness meditation, we investigate the nature of perception. By observing the arising and passing of perceptions without getting caught in them, we can free ourselves from their influence and the suffering they create. So that's a great summary of this process that we're looking at today. A little bit of humor for you, just to lighten things up a bit here. Why did the perception cross the road? To see if the grass is greener on the other side. But ended up realizing it's all just a matter of perception. Moving on. So perception fits in there, right, nestled in the middle. It's between the mind states and between the feelings and the sensations and the body. So that corresponds to our experience more or less. And it's very linked and feeds concepts. So our concepts of people and characters and the details of them are heavily shaped by perception. And perception heavily feeds intention and attention and the kind of things that we focus on and aim our attention at. So these feed and fuel each other, and the intentions feed our perceptions, and what we pay attention to feeds again, so it goes round. Late Venerable Nun Ayya Kema said, perception is like a magician that creates illusions in our minds. We need to be mindful and question those illusions, just like a skeptical audience member shouting, "Hey, I see through your tricks." So we have to be the one who's going to stand up and call out those illusions. Eckhart Tolle said, distorted perception is like looking at life through a cracked mirror. The practice of mindfulness is like polishing that mirror so you can see reality with clarity and embrace the beauty of the present moment. I just made a note for myself here that when I was teaching art to teenagers in England, that we had a section on Picasso, on Cubism. And I was very surprised. I didn't know this. Picasso had originally, when he was pre-training, he was doing very realistic, almost religious pictures that were very, very normal looking in that sense. And then he found a cracked camera, a camera with a cracked lens in it. And he took pictures through this, and he was really fascinated by the cracked mirror effect within, and the effects that came out, this cracked, shattered look, and this heavily influenced his future works. So, it could be that he was contemplating this idea of the cracked mirror, life through a cracked mirror. So Alan Watts, a great meditation master, trip over our own assumptions, literally stumble. And meditation is like learning new dance steps. So we have to let go of rigid patterns and flow with the rhythm of life. That flowing part is very important. Often we are exactly what he says there. I don't know if you ever learned to dance, but it's exactly very similar there. So let's now transition from perception to discussing the Āsavas or defilements. How these defilements arise due to distorted perception, and they affect our mental states, leading to suffering. First of all, introducing this new term, Āsava. When you have a line over the A, it's pronounced long. Asava. And combining with elements also of the dependent origination and this map that we have in front of us here. So dependent origination, if you didn't see that, you can go back and look at talk 7 that went into that. So Asava, what's the meaning of this? So I've muted this down to make it easier to read. That which flows out, an outflow, or also an influx. So that's one meaning. And then another meaning, totally different, is a spirit in terms of a drink, like a liquor. The intoxicating extract or secretion of a tree or flower. A third meaning, totally different from either of those, a little bit like the first one, discharge from a sore, like pus, like a stinky secretion, yich. And then thirdly, in psychology, for certain specified ideas which intoxicate the mind, they bemuddle it. This great word here, befoozle it, so that it cannot rise to higher things. So freedom from the Asavas constitutes arahantship. And the fight for the extinction of these Asavas forms one of the main duties of man. And then it has these 4 down at the bottom. Sensuality, rebirth, which is the lust of life, speculation or views, so that's actually ego, speculation is not really right, and ignorance. So those are called Karmasava, Bhavasava, Ditthiyasava, and Avijjasava, which we'll look at. The important part there is certain specified ideas which intoxicate the mind and bemuddle it. But we also have these other inferences. So intoxicating influence, or even a sort of nasty intoxicating influence, so the nastiness of the wound discharge there. So let's leave intoxicating influence as our main meaning. So we have these 2 avijjas, misinterpreting and the unmindfulness and agitated part. And those really mean misunderstanding and not aware, or wrong understanding. Something like that. You'll get the idea, you'll get the gist. There's not one translation. So I'll move them around a little bit to give you some different versions. Then we also have tanha involved, and that is the fever of unsatisfied longing. So we have first kind of tanha. There's not one, there's 3. First kind and the second kind. The first kind is in the intoxicant of sensuality. Secondly, intoxicant of wanting to be, like ambition. And thirdly, there's the not wanting to be, like suicidal depression. Thirdly, so there's 2A and 2B really there. Thirdly, intoxicant of views. Fourthly, the intoxicant of ignorance or unawareness, wrong ideas. So we could say the intoxicating influence of sensuality, or the intoxicating influence of wanting to be or not wanting to be, the intoxicating influence of views, or the intoxicating influence of ignorance. So we have several tanhas, karma tanha and bhava tanha and vibhava tanha in Pali. And the views, the word is ditti. Avijja is the word for ignorance, as we're saying. So asava, certain specified ideas which intoxicate the mind, they bemuddle it. So all of those are asavas, the pink ones there. And these feed off each other and fuel each other. If you remember the last talk, we were talking about dependent origination. This showed how three things co-feed each other, co-support each other. Let's look again about craving there. Tanha, which is one of them. Craving of sensations, karma tanha. And then the fever of unsatisfied longing of wanting to be. And then the fever of unsatisfied longing of not wanting to be. Right? So those, and the other part of that is there's wanting to be, which is like subjective, is me. And there's also objective, like I want it to be. Or I do not want it to be. So those are all involved. So we had our 3 pointers that created the samsara vata that we saw last week. And here they are. So the first one is not awareness. The second one is tanha. And the third one is upadana, which I want to look at which we normally have been translating as attachment. So those 3 are a triangle. And they lead to this fourth thing, the yellow one down there, which leads to the birth of ego and distorted views of I, me, mine. And that's ditti. A little bit complicated, a lot of stuff on the screen, don't worry about it. Firstly, I want to translate this upadana, which we've been translating of attachment. Now, attachment is in there, it is included there, you can see. But it also has a lot of other things. Upadana, substratum, by a layer by means of which an active process is kept alive or going, fuel, supply, provisions, supported by and drawing one's existence from by means of taking up fuel. That's very different than just attachment. Attachment is just like you're clinging onto your handbag or something like that. You're really gripping something. You're holding on to a £10 note or something like that, or a $10 bill. You're clinging onto it. This is different. This is more like shoveling coal into a fire. It's very different. Or finding one's support by, clinging to, or nourished by. So it's almost like a beggar, and you're giving money, and it's going, yes, more, give me more. So there's something a bit different in the meaning of upadana than perhaps we've been led to believe. Jack Kornfield quotes, through mindfulness we can become aware of the Āsavas, the deep-rooted tendencies that cause suffering. By cultivating present moment awareness, we can gradually transform these defilements and find liberation. Let's now explore an example that illustrates this concept. So I can offer an imaginary scenario to illustrate how one might overcome the Asavas based on these general principles of Buddhist practice. Imagine a situation where you were struggling with strong attachment to a material possession. And you had a desire for external validation, for other people to really say, yeah, wow, you're respected. This attachment and craving for material things can be seen as manifestations of the asava of sensual desire, kama asava, for the object, and the asava of craving for becoming or wanting to be something. Bhava asava, like I want to be respected, I want to be recognized. Through your practice of mindfulness and self-reflection, you became aware of the unsatisfactory nature of constantly seeking external validation, and the fleeting happiness derived from material possessions. Recognizing the suffering caused by attachment, you decided to cultivate contentment, santuti, and non-attachment, anupadana. Okay, so firstly, I'm going to whiz through this. So firstly, what we're about here is understanding the Āsavas, the different types of Āsavas, such as sensual desire, wanting to become something, ignorance and ego views, and how they arise and perpetuate suffering. Firstly, recognizing the Āsavas in our own minds and daily experience and the way they manifest as unwholesome thoughts, emotions and behaviors. And then the impact of Āsavas. So acknowledge that detrimental effects of the Āsavas on our well-being, relationships and overall spiritual growth. So there is an urgent need to address them there. And then overcoming the Āsavas very critically. So one is the detrimental effects, and then let's check into practical strategies and techniques for purifying the mind and weakening the power of the Āsavas, such as mindfulness, meditation, ethical conduct and wise reflection, the key elements of Buddhism. So just recap and summary the key points so far. Perception, distorted perception. We've talked about defilements, how unaware perception or bias, prejudice and distorted perception feeds, fuels and regenerates greed, craving, hatred, anger, ego and views. Let's look at Satipatthāna as one of our main tools. I want to connect this discussion on perception and defilements to the practice of Satipatthāna. And that involves cultivating a mindfulness on body, feelings, mind, and some groups of mindfulness tools we looked at. I want to highlight how this Satipatthāna can help us observe and understand the arising and passing away of defilements, and that can foster wisdom and reduce their hold on our minds. So remember the technique I was showing you, how a meditator might see through the lens of the Four Foundations. So that's our Four Foundations and the dependent origination. On the left, I got dependent origination review from last talk, and I've kind of sliced up the Four Foundations into 5 slices. And there's the reason for doing that. I want to then make them slightly transparent and show how they overlayer each other. Remember, just as a skilled archer can swiftly hit a target, just as a bubble appears and vanishes on the water, just as a mirage appears in the desert, and just like a painter painting and creating, perception is like all of these. So perception's in the middle there. Now let's look when you overlayer these, which is actually what happens more in our real experience. You can see how kind of cluttered and busy it all is, because we've got many factors that are overlaying. That's our normal experience. But what we're trying to do here is show at the front there we have dependent origination. So what we want to do is to take our wisdom from the dependent origination, how things affect each other within ourselves, and then how we can clarify the mind by becoming more mindful during meditation, which means it will leave the 10 negative states which are lower in the mind states, and then perception will become more clear. So our focal area is going onto the body. And then critically, this is what happens, is that the mind states and the perception become simpler and clearer. You've got a very simple object to look at, your breathing, your belly going in and out, not a complicated world around us. With a clarified mind, simplified perception down onto the body, it gives everything time to rest and reboot, and a time of holding back the defilements. And then when any defilements do arise, you're not feeding it by being around in a busy world. You're just working on it and seeing it exactly as it is without feeding it. That's the idea. You're not feeding it. You're not fueling it. You're not reacting so much. Time to clear. And actually, critically, it kind of works more this way. You have sanya, a perception at the top, looking down at your experience through your clear mind, at your body, at your 6 senses, and at your feelings. rather than the sideways on as I was looking. In a way, that's sort of how it really works in practice. So that's a simplified view of how the Four Foundations function, just in a snapshot. Using the wisdom of the dependent origination, using the mindfulness and the wholesome states of the mind, and using perception much clarified and simplified by just saying awareness of seeing, awareness of hearing, awareness of rising, awareness of falling. Things as they are, not interpreted, see? When you're looking into a room, you're making all sorts of judgments, but when you just say awareness of seeing, it's all very different. And awareness of seeing, it just goes straight through. And that would be looking at the furthest one, which is rising and falling, or with the feet in walking meditation. So these 5 parts of our life, these aggregates, our body, sensations, thoughts, feelings, perceptions, and mind states are interconnected and together form the basis of our experience, providing these insights into the nature of selflessness and the conditioned nature of existence. So we're going to be trying to, homework for you, perception and the 5 aggregates. Try connecting the function and the concept of perception to the broader framework of the 5 aggregates. Remember that perception is an integral part of the mental formations aggregate, the sankhara, the chitta. Perception is built in and linked to that when we're talking about the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Perception is a part of chitta, the 3rd one. And that includes emotions and volitional activities linking to thoughts. So explore how perception influences those other aggregates, such as feelings. How does perception influence your feelings and your sense consciousnesses, and how they in turn shape our perception? There they are. These are called the 5 aggregates when you divide them into 5 like this. First aggregate is body. The fifth, from the 5th aggregate normally, it's at the end, is the 6 awarenesses. The 2nd aggregate is feeling. The 3rd aggregate is perception, and the 4th aggregate is these mind states and functions. So this is a commonly used in Buddhism. Quote here to round it off with Bhante Gunarattana, because it's not easy, this. If the 5 aggregates were characters in a movie, perception would be the quirky, unpredictable one. It's like the comic relief that adds spice to the story. But remember, don't get too attached to the plot twist, because perception's always doing that. To summarize, as we come to the end of our journey through perception, Āsavas, Satipatthāna, and the 5 Khandhas, let us reflect on the profound insights gained. We've explored the magic of perception, how it shapes our experiences and influences our reality. We've examined the deep-rooted tendencies that bind us and learned to cultivate mindfulness as a powerful tool for liberation. By developing present moment awareness through the 4 foundations of mindfulness, we have unlocked the keys to understanding our thoughts, emotions, and sensations. We have discovered the impermanence of existence and the interconnectedness of mind and matter. In this shared exploration, we have embraced a light-hearted yet profound approach to life's experiences. We have witnessed the transformative power of mindfulness, leading us to greater wisdom and freedom from suffering. With gratitude for this collective journey, let us carry these teachings in our hearts and continue to cultivate the art of living fully awakened. Thank you once again for being here. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.